I caught her red-handed at 5:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. Pajamas, no bra, fuzzy slippers, HOA badge swinging from her lanyard like it meant something. There she was, crouched over my coop with my brown ceramic egg basket in her hand, my egg basket. She didn't even flinch when I stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee and my phone aimed right at her. "Good morning, Gerald," she said, like she wasn't stealing breakfast from my hens every day for the last 2 weeks. "Zulie Andrews," I said, setting my coffee down on the porch rail. "You ever think about knocking instead of robbing me blind?" She stood up, brushed a feather off her bathrobe, and had the nerve to say, "Backyard chickens aren't even allowed in the HOA charter. Technically, these eggs are unpermitted. I'm just enforcing the rules." I stared at her. "So your enforcement plan is to steal the contraband, their evidence," she said, holding up the basket like she was in a courtroom. "I'm collecting it for documentation. Every morning," she blinked. "It's an ongoing violation, Gerald. Zulie was the kind of woman who made you want to install extra locks on your mailbox. She wasn't just a member of the HOA board, she was the board. President, treasurer, and secretary. And she wielded that power like a hobbyist dictator. I'd moved into Chestnut Hollow 6 months ago with my hens, coop permit from the county in hand. Zulie had been waiting at my doorstep with a clipboard before the moving truck even left. "You'll have to remove the coop," she said back then. "Nope," I told her. "County ordinance allows up to 6 hens, I've got 5. We don't follow county ordinances here, Gerald." "Well, I do." The war started that day. Petty notices, fake fines, a citation for unneighborly clucking. But it went nuclear when I noticed my eggs were missing. At first I thought raccoons. I even installed a trail cam. That's when I caught her Zulie sneaking into my yard with surgical precision, lifting eggs like they were diamonds. She'd check her watch, glance around, and scoop them up before tiptoeing back through the side gate. That Tuesday was the final straw. "You set foot in my yard again, I'll press charges," I warned. "Press all you want," she said, stepping onto the sidewalk. "But I'm the HOA, and I've already submitted a motion to have your coop dismantled at the next board meeting." "There is no board," I said. "There will be. I'm appointing new members, and we're voting on your chickens." I decided then that if she wanted eggs so badly, I'd give her a surprise next time, one with talons and an attitude, Rooster. Yeah, I knew roosters were louder and legally dicey under county law, but I also knew you could keep one temporarily if it was for vetting or breeding. I just needed one morning. One glorious, feather-ripping, red-combed morning, so I made a call to my cousin upstate. He raised Rhode Island Reds, and he owed me a favor. 2 days later, I introduced Rufus to the nest box. Rufus didn't waste time settling in. By dawn the next day, he was already announcing himself like a feathered trumpet with an attitude problem. I'd barely poured my first cup of coffee when he let loose with a war cry that rattled the windows. Rufus had lungs, and spite exactly what I needed, I was crouched on the porch, phone in hand, camera rolling. 5:41. No sign of Zulie yet. Rufus paced in the coop, agitated but controlled. He wasn't the cuddly type. Perfect. At 5:46, the side gate creaked open. Zulie's head poked through the gap like a meerkat casing the savannah. She took a cautious step in, clutching her little evidence basket like she was auditioning for a heist film. Same robe, same slippers. Same badge bouncing like a sheriff in a spaghetti western. She crouched at the coop, reached for the latch. Rufus exploded. He launched himself against the wire so violently that Zulie fell backward onto the grass, the egg basket flying from her hands and landing sideways in the dirt. She scrambled to her feet, flailing for balance, hair half undone and one slipper missing. "What the?" she screeched, backing away as Rufus flapped and crowed like he'd just discovered his life's purpose was revenge. I stepped off the porch, still filming. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. Zulie glared at me, panting, eyes wild. "That thing is dangerous." "That's a rooster," I said. "They get protective when strangers sneak into their coop. You can't have a rooster. County allows temporary stays for breeding and health assessments." I'm within regulation. He attacked me, he flapped in your direction, because you trespassed. Again. She looked down at her robe, now streaked with dew and grass stains. The badge had popped off the lanyard and lay forgotten near the fence post. She didn't pick it up. This is harassment, she hissed. No, I said, stepping closer. What you've been doing, entering my property without permission, removing property, issuing false notices, that's criminal trespass. I reported it this morning. Officer McNally will be knocking on your door by noon. You called the police on me. You broke the law. Multiple times. I've got video evidence complete with timestamps. I've already sent it to the County Code Enforcement Office and filed a formal complaint with the DA's office about HOA overreach. Zulie's expression shifted, not fear calculation. She was already thinking ahead. This neighborhood has rules, she said quietly. You can't just do whatever you want, I nodded. And neither can you. She turned and limped toward the gate, grabbing her slipper on the way out without looking back. By 9:30, I had a voicemail from County Code Enforcement. They'd received my footage, confirmed the coup was permitted, and were launching an investigation into unlawful enforcement practices by the HOA. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd filed complaints in the last year. Zulie had a pattern. At 10:15, a black county SUV pulled up across from Zulie's house. A stern-looking woman in a gray blazer stepped out with a clipboard and a folder tucked under one arm. She knocked twice. No answer. The officer who arrived minutes later had better luck. Zulie opened the door just wide enough to argue from behind the safety chain. Gerald, a voice called from behind me. I turned to see my neighbor Sheila walking up in gardening gloves, eyes wide. Did you hear? Code Enforcement's here. Someone said there's a fraud investigation into the HOA. Sounds about right, I said. She's been collecting unauthorized fines and misusing access codes. Sheila leaned in. She tried to find me last month for drying towels on the railing. Said it violated neighborhood aesthetics. I looked through the bylaws, there's no such clause. She made up half the rules, I said, and enforced them solo. She tried to ban wind chimes, Sheila added. That afternoon I printed out flyers, not to start a fight but to start a vote. Special community meeting, Chestnut Hollow residents only topic. HOA reform and board restructuring location. Community park gazebo Saturday. 2 p.m. Bring documentation of any fines, notices, or HOA correspondence you've received by the next morning. 3 dozen flyers had been tucked into mailboxes and posted on bulletin boards. I sat back and waited. Saturday came fast. The park was packed. Lawn chairs, strollers, dogs on leashes, people I hadn't seen since moving in. Turns out, Zulie had annoyed just about everyone in some way. One couple brought a binder, an actual 3-inch binder of notices they'd received over the last year. Half were unsigned, most were nonsense. She fined us for painting our door red, one man said to the crowd. Apparently it clashed with the seasonal foliage. She threatened to tow my car, said another, because the tire tread was aesthetically disruptive. She said my daughter's lemonade stand was unauthorized commerce, someone else added. I stood up, holding a foam board with a blown-up still from my trail cam footage. Zulie crouched over my coop with the egg basket. This is theft. This is trespassing. And this is someone abusing power that was never voted on. We've let one person masquerade as a governing body for too long. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. We can do better, I said. We can vote in a real board, with transparency, with checks and balances. And if we want to dissolve the HOA entirely, well, there's a legal path for that too. A woman in the back raised her hand. What happens to her? Well, I said, glancing at the officer now casually seated on a bench nearby, that depends on the county's findings. But she's already been removed as acting president pending investigation. By Monday, a formal audit was underway. The emergency board we voted in 5 residents with actual experience in law, accounting, and mediation had full access to HOA records. What they found was worse than expected. Untraceable fines. A personal PayPal account linked to the HOA website, vendor invoices with no matching work orders, and over $8,000 in administrative expenses that included spa visits and meal deliveries. The board handed everything over to the DA's office. Zulie was served with a court summons the following week. The neighborhood changed after that. Lawn chairs returned to porches. Wind chimes jingled freely. Kids rode scooters past the park without being told to slow down by someone with a clipboard. As for the chickens, they kept laying. Rufus went back to my cousin's farm once the heat died down. He'd done his job, a legend now, the rooster who saved Chestnut Hollow and me. I built a taller fence just in case, but I haven't had to use the security cameras since, not once. Zulie's court date came faster than anyone expected. The county prosecutor didn't waste time once the forensic accountant from the HOA audit delivered his findings. Bank transfers to personal accounts, falsified invoices, and unauthorized entry into private properties, there was enough to trigger criminal charges. The charges weren't just about trespassing and small-time theft anymore. This was wire fraud, embezzlement, and malicious misrepresentation of a legal entity. I found out when a plainclothes detective came by to confirm a few details about the footage I submitted. His name was Det. Alonzo Carr, a tall, quiet man with a notepad and the kind of eyes that didn't miss much. "She used your property to bolster her authority," he said, flipping through a folder. "Claimed the eggs were confiscated as evidence for HOA compliance." That's not just trespassing, it's impersonation of a regulatory process. That's serious. "I figured she was stretching it," I said, watching Rufus scratch around a feed bucket in the backyard. "She didn't just stretch it," he said. "She rewrote the rules and then enforced them with fake sanctions. We've got 3 affidavits from residents she threatened with property liens, and she doesn't have the legal standing to issue a single one." I nodded slowly. "What happens next?" He closed his folder. "She'll be answering to a judge. And if half of what we found sticks, she won't be running anything but a mop bucket in county lockup." That night I got a call from Sheila. "She's gone," she said without preamble. "Gone. She vanished sometime this afternoon. Her house is dark, cars missing, mailbox overflowing." I walked down the street to confirm. Sure enough, porch light off, security light disabled, blinds drawn. A legal notice had been slapped crookedly across her front door in red print. I stepped closer to read it. "Notice of court summons failure to appear will result in bench warrant." She ran. The next morning, the sheriff's department was on her lawn with a locksmith and 2 officers. I stood across the street with my arms folded, watching as they changed the locks and inventoried the interior. I wasn't the only one. Neighbors gathered in quiet knots, whispering and shaking their heads. By the following week, her property was officially seized pending investigation into assets purchased with HOA funds. A new sign went up in the window. "Estate under temporary custodianship, no trespassing." A week after that, I was invited to speak at a county oversight meeting. They were reviewing HOA conduct in unincorporated neighborhoods and wanted real-world cases. My video footage, printed notices, and the new board's audit report were all submitted into the public record. "Mr. DeWitt," one of the council members asked, "did you ever receive a formal explanation or apology for the theft on your property?" "No," I said. "She was too busy pretending to be in charge." The councilwoman nodded. "Thank you, we're pushing for mandatory transparency regulations." This case might be the tipping point. Outside the chamber, a reporter from the local news team flagged me down. "You're the chicken guy, right?" "I guess that's me," she grinned. "We're running a segment on rogue HOAs next week. Mind if we interview you near the coop?" 2 days later, a camera crew set up in my backyard. Rufus, back on a courtesy visit for the occasion, strutted around like he knew he was being watched. "So tell us what happened that morning," the reporter said, holding the mic just out of frame. I pointed to the coop. She came in right there, thought she'd grab her usual haul. Instead, she got Rufus. He's not big on uninvited guests. The segment aired that night. "The Rooster That Defended a Neighborhood," the headline read, complete with dramatic music and slow-motion footage of Rufus flapping his wings. By the following week, the phone started ringing. Other neighborhoods, other counties. People asking how we restructured our HOA, how we caught the fraud, how we forced a vote without legal pushback. Apparently, our little rebellion had become a blueprint. One call stood out: a woman named Carla from over in Pine Bridge Estates. "She's here," she whispered. "Who?" "Zulie. She's calling herself June now. Said she's volunteering to help with our HOA transition, showed up with a clipboard and everything." I felt my stomach turn. "You sure it's her?" "Positive. Same voice, same exact robe. She wore it to the first meeting." I paused. "She's not supposed to be organizing anything, not until her case is resolved." "Oh, we know, that's why I called you." I gave her Car's contact info and told her to send photos. She had them in less than 10 minutes. Zulie, now June, standing outside a rec center with a folder labeled HOA Compliance Review. Carr called me 2 days later. "She's in custody." Again, tried to use a fake name and forged ID. We got her on attempted fraud while under indictment. "She won't be slipping out this time." Zulie's trial hit the news shortly after. The story spread like wildfire. A suburban tyrant who weaponized an HOA to fund spa days and threaten lemonade stands. The prosecutor didn't hold back. Over a dozen witnesses testified. I was one of them. She used her position to intimidate homeowners, collect fake fines, and access private property without consent, I said on the stand. No one authorized her, no one elected her. She just declared herself the boss and started issuing orders. The jury took less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to 5 years, with restitution required for every cent of misappropriated funds. Her assets, what little remained untouched, were sold to repay residents. The rest came from a civil settlement filed by the new HOA board. 3 months after the verdict, Chestnut Hollow held its first official HOA election using a neutral third-party mediator. I didn't run for office. I preferred my fence line and quiet mornings, but I helped design the new charter. Checks, balances, term limits, and a permanent ban on solo enforcement authority. "You should at least lead the welcome committee," Sheila joked one afternoon while we were fixing the community garden gate. "I did my part," I said, tightening the bolt. "Let someone else handle the bake sales," she laughed. "Fair enough. But you're still the reason we have a neighborhood again instead of a fiefdom." Rufus, now semi-retired, lived part-time at a local petting farm but still made regular appearances when I needed an extra pair of beady eyes on the flock. Kids in the neighborhood drew chalk murals of him on the sidewalks. Someone even made a little superhero cape for his next visit. He hated it, kept pecking at the Velcro, but wore it long enough for a group photo. The new HOA board held monthly meetings in the park open to all, decisions by vote, minutes posted online. No clipboards, no fake fines. Just neighbors figuring things out together, and the eggs. They stayed right where they belonged. In the basket on my kitchen counter, still warm from the coop, never confiscated, never stolen, and Rufus. Well, he got his own page on the HOA website. Neighborhood security liaison retired. Every now and then, I'd look out the window at the coop and smile, not because of the eggs. Not even because of Rufus, but because for the first time, no one in Chestnut Hollow had to worry about someone like Zulie ever again. The sun had started rising earlier by the time spring rolled in, and Chestnut Hollow looked nothing like the place I'd moved into almost a year ago. Lawns were alive with clover and dandelions, not citations. Kids were building cardboard spaceships on driveways instead of being scolded for sidewalk chalk. And the community bulletin board actually had community announcements on it for potlucks, local band nights, and the occasional lost cat. But one morning I got a letter in the mail that made my coffee go cold before I could finish the first sip. It was from a law firm. The letterhead read Chester and Darnell LLP, a place I hadn't heard of, but the contents were unmistakable. A subpoena. Zulie, now inmate number 49821, was trying to appeal her sentence, and I was listed as a key witness in the upcoming hearing. I read the whole thing again, just to be sure I wasn't misunderstanding. She had filed for a retrial on grounds of unlawful property surveillance and entrapment. I nearly laughed out loud. She was claiming that the footage of her stealing eggs on my property, captured by my camera after weeks of theft, was an orchestrated setup meant to provoke and humiliate her. The appeal was scheduled for May 2nd, downtown at the county courthouse. I made one phone call to the newly elected HOA vice president, Raj Patel. Raj was a retired civil litigation attorney and the kind of guy who could quote zoning laws like they were scripture. I asked him to come with me. "I'll bring the original bylaws, the audit summary, and the letter from the prosecutor's office affirming the chain of evidence," he said. "She won't be able to spin her way out of this, not this time." We arrived at the courthouse early. A few other residents had come to support, including the couple with the binder of fake fines and Sheila, who had a new haircut and a canvas tote bag full of documentation. None of us had been subpoenaed before, so we sat in the hallway flipping through our paperwork like we were cramming for an exam. When Zulie was brought in, she didn't look like the woman who used to strut around the neighborhood issuing threats in a bathrobe. Her hair was pinned back in a blunt bun, and she wore a beige correctional uniform with a county badge stitched on the front. She didn't look at me as she was led to the defense table. The judge, a middle-aged man with half-moon glasses and a tone that suggested he'd heard every excuse in the book, called the hearing to order. Zulie's new attorney, a wiry man with a voice like sandpaper, stood up and launched into a prepared statement about unwarranted surveillance and neighborly disputes escalating beyond proportion. He argued that Zulie had been targeted by a group of residents who colluded to create a hostile environment and publicly shame her using manipulated footage. He called me to the stand. "Mr. DeWitt," he said, "isn't it true that you deliberately placed a rooster in the coop with the intent to provoke my client into reacting?" "I placed him there because someone had been stealing my eggs for over 2 weeks," I said calmly. "I had no idea who it was until I installed a camera." "But you admit that the rooster's presence was meant to deter," I nodded. "Yes, the same way you'd put a lock on a fence after someone's broken in." He tried to twist my words again, but the judge raised a hand. "Mr. DeWitt," the judge said, "were there any signs, warnings, or notifications posted on your property at the time of the recording?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I had a posted notice on the gate that said surveillance was in use." "It's visible in the footage. And did the defendant have permission to enter your property during any of the dates in question?" "No, sir, none whatsoever." The judge turned to Zulie's lawyer. "I'd like to see this alleged manipulated footage." Raj stood and handed over the original files unedited, time-stamped and corroborated by the county forensic team. The judge watched the video twice, once in silence, then again with the audio turned up. Zulie was clearly seen entering the yard, opening the coop and removing items from within. She didn't pause, didn't hesitate, and certainly didn't act like she was under any duress. When the video ended, the judge leaned back. "I see no evidence of entrapment here," he said. "What I do see is premeditated trespassing, theft, and impersonation of authority. This appeal is not only denied, but I'm referring the defendant to the district attorney for possible perjury and filing false claims." Zulie's face drained of what little color was left. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as the judge continued. "This court also recommends psychological evaluation prior to any future parole requests. The defendant's actions demonstrate a pattern of manipulative and coercive behavior that appears untreated and unresolved." He banged the gavel once, and that was it. The appeal was dead. Zulie was led out of the courtroom without glancing at anyone. Afterwards, we all stood on the courthouse steps, blinking in the sunlight. "Well," Raj said, tucking his folder under one arm. That's the last time she'll be calling herself a compliance officer. Sheila laughed. You think the petting zoo would let us throw Rufus a retirement party? We did exactly that. 2 weekends later, the neighborhood gathered at the park. Rufus made his grand entrance in a little red wagon, pulled by a kid dressed in overalls. Someone had made a cake shaped like a coop. There were plastic eggs filled with candy, a raffle for gardening supplies, and a photo booth with cardboard cutouts of chicken wings. At the back of the park, we posted a new sign. Chestnut Hollow Homeowners Association reformed 2024 governed by residents. Not rulers below it was a small plaque with Rufus's name and the words in honor of the sentinel who crowed justice. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the last of the lemonade was poured, I sat near the coop with my feet up on the railing. The hens were quiet, tucked into their nest boxes, and the air smelled like lilac and freshly cut grass. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Raj, carrying a half-empty pie tin. "Brought you the last slice," he said, handing it over. "Blueberry," Sheila insisted. I took it with a nod. "She always does." He sat down beside me. "You ever think you'd be the guy who took down a rogue HOA president with a chicken?" "Nope," I said. "But I also didn't think I'd need a surveillance system to protect my breakfast." He chuckled. "You know, the county's been talking about using our case as a reference example, setting new standards for HOA oversight based on what we went through." "Good," I said. "Might save someone else a year of headaches." We watched the stars come out one by one. No more fake notices. No more stolen eggs. No more clipboards at sunrise. Just a quiet neighborhood, a few tired hens, and a rooster who'd earned every feather on his crown.